First of all, where I'm from Wollongong. So how many people have been to Wollongong?
It was about 4. So,
Really?
so a long time ago.
Congratulations! Wow. Well, this is Wollongong. This is how you remember it. It's got a beautiful coastline. It's on the beach. It's 1 hour from Sydney, so you'll see Sydney up the top there. And, I can't make my point, but anyway. 1 hour from Sydney Airport, and Wollongong campus is our main campus, but we have 7 smaller locations along the coast, so we cover all of southern New South Wales. In addition, we have a campus in Dubai with 5,000 students. There are 26,000 students in New South Wales. There are 5,000 students in Dubai. Who's been to Dubai?
No.
Yeah, you were in the airport yesterday. 5,000 students in Dubai, and then we have teaching partnerships like most other universities do in about 10 other locations around the world. So we're quite an international campus. Now, I was just asking who'd been to Dubai, who's been to Wollongong. Karen, have you been to Wollongong?
Haven't, no.
No?
Been to
Okay.
Australia either. At all, anywhere.
I'll just go back to the slides. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today is in part something to do with my OLnet fellowship, and in part a case study of a project that I was involved in from 2006 to 2009, but is ongoing in Australia. It's called Project EnROLE. There's the web address there, enrole.uow.edu.au, for you to look at it any time. And normally I'd be wearing one of those badges, but I forgot to bring it with me, and I would have handed you all a badge so that you also got enrolled in the project. The topic is enrolling academics in sharing teaching ideas, and that's what we were trying to do with Project EnROLE, but it was specifically about online role play. So a lot of the repositories about sharing teaching ideas, a lot of the stuff about open educational resources is trying to do everything, every teaching idea about everything. So we took a slice out of that and just thought we'd concentrate on online role play, which is my favourite topic anyway. And I will show you a little bit about what I mean by online role play. But the point of the presentation is it's not about building a repository of open educational resources about online role play. It's about building a community of practice. And I take note of Tom Carey's quote from the Ascolite conference in Singapore in 2007, where he said that when thinking about repository structures, we really need to be thinking about not a repository-centred view, but a community-centred view. And so the title of his talk was From Repositories Supported by Communities to Communities Supported by Repositories. And that's when we actually had a symposium at Ascolite 2007 about Project EnROLE, so we felt this really supported what we were doing. And I don't think this is news to anyone here at the Open University either, so I'm just reinforcing directions that you're already taking with CloudWorks and so on, which is why I've come here to follow through on this project by moving it into CloudWorks and continuing the discussion around sharing teaching ideas. Oh, hello, Chris. So a definition of online and blended role plays. This is what we mean by role play in the e-learning sense. So they're designed to increase understanding of real-life human interaction dynamics. Most importantly, participants assume a role in someone else's shoes or in someone else's situation. Although a lot of the stuff can happen in a face-to-face situation, the in-role interaction is online. Another way of describing online role play is using what's called the swim lanes approach that we developed as part of a previous national project on learning designs in Australia. So we describe it as students enrol, they research their character, they write something publicly about their character for viewing by the other students in the role play. They react to a scenario, interacting with each other, try to resolve the scenario, the problem, and then reflect on the learning objectives from the experience. You probably can't see all of that very well in writing, but you can find it on the website. For me, online role play I've been tracking for over 20 years, so here I'm talking about very low-tech stuff. There is stuff now happening in high-tech, particularly Second Life. People are starting to build online role plays in Second Life. but for most of the 20 years that I've been tracking online role play, they've been in just discussion forums. You don't really need to spend a whole lot of money and design a whole lot of graphics. So this is an example of a role play that used to run at, I think still runs at the University of Western Australia, where students in teams represent a country at a United Nations forum. So it's diplomatic encounters. So some students are playing France, some are playing China, some are playing the UK, and so on. Another example of a role play, this is much simpler, is Save Wallaby Forest from Deakin University in Australia. Now, who knows what a wallaby is?
Small.
Yes, very good, excellent. Normally I would then hand you out a Project EnROLE badge as a prize.
Oh,
I know, but I didn't bring any with me, I'm so sorry. So I should say there are prizes for audience interaction. Save Wallaby Forest is a much simpler role play in the sense that there's only 2 roles. Half the class play the developers who are going to build a new subdivision, a new suburb in Wallaby Forest. The other half of the class play the action group who are going to save Wallaby Forest from the nasty developers. And the role play is run in a public relations course. So what students are actually learning is public relations and how to write PR statements, media releases, in particular media releases for action groups and the community, not rather than corporates, but they're doing both sides of it. This one, so it's much simpler because there's only 2 roles, and the class, are divided in half, so it's much easier for the academic lecturer to manage. But what's nice about this one is it starts with a video to set the scenario. Normally you just have a page that describes the scenario. So I'm just going to show you the video to give you an example of how a role play might work.
Local Borrelinga residents, calling themselves Save Wallaby Forest, say they are angry that their rural paradise may end up just another slice of suburbia if council allows a housing development in 40 hectares of private land known as Wallaby Forest. We spoke to Community Action Group spokesperson Frank Gersol.
Look, this proposed development site is an unmitigated disaster. What we have here in Borrelinga is precious remnant vegetation, and it's also the last local habitat of the spotted quoll. Now, it's an endangered species and it's a small forest-dwelling mammal. This is exactly how our environmental heritage is being sold out. It's a matter for the state and it's a matter for the whole country.
Who else supports the Wallaby Forest cause?
Well, young families, working people, people that actually live and commit to this community. We've got the unions on board with this, and we're going to have a picket line here by the end of the week. Some of the biggest environmental groups in this country are taking action. I mean, it's about greed and profit at the public's expense. Mate, Save Wallaby Forest will do everything we can to keep this land free of housing.
We asked John Sherrin, building developer with Envision Construction, how he feels.
Look, this group is a vocal minority. Their argument is hysterical nonsense. Real Borrelinga residents want to see their town prosper and grow. Save Wallaby Forest act like they've been elected. Not only that, they're misrepresenting to the locals. The proper planning permits will be in place, and if we have an environmental issue, then we'll deal with it. I mean, really, these people have got to start looking at the positive side of this.
Local councillor Kathy Engadine, you were elected on a platform of community consultation. What do you think about the proposed housing expansion?
I want to make it clear that I haven't made up my mind on this issue yet. I'm trying my best to understand both sides of the argument. As you know, our council has a good reputation for listening to its ratepayers, but we must look at the big picture as well. At the end of the day, I'm sure all parties just want to see Borrelinga expand and prosper.
Do you believe her? How are you coping with the Australian accent?
We're used to neighbours.
No, I was going to say how are you coping with my Australian accent, but there were some good ones there. It goes on for a bit longer. It's a 5-minute trigger video to start it off, but you can see it's quite an interesting one to draw the students in. And in the end, it's the academic who is playing the role of the counsellor, not in the video, but on the online section, and she makes a decision about who wins at a council meeting. So that's the background about what's happened? Have I lost her? There we go. there. That's the background about what is a role play, and I will show you one more later on. But at the time we started Project EnROLE in 2005, I'd been tracking role plays and found that there were about, in Australia, 43 role plays running and 54 role play designers. So the aim of Project EnROLE was to double our numbers by the end of the project. So our goal was to get to 100 role plays and 150, it sounded like a good target to aim for. And we were going to do this by building a community of practice. Now I want to talk about the elements of building a community of practice, so that's the focus of the discussion now, the presentation now. At the time we started this, people thought we meant, well, you just put up a website, a repository and a website, and the interaction will happen and the community happens. But we felt that that's not really going to happen, that we felt that from what we'd done in the past, there needed to be a lot of face-to-face interaction, that it just won't happen. Sandra builds a website and they'll all come. No, they don't. They don't. So for us, it was a blended approach to community building. It was not just online. So in year one, starting with the project team, which was 5 universities, UOW is University of Wollongong, so we were the lead university. We worked with University of Technology Sydney, that's UTS, University of New South Wales, that's there, Macquarie University and the University of Sydney, and there was space for another one who in the end didn't join us. But we worked to develop up clusters of role play designers at our own universities, because at our own universities we can work face to face. We could have morning teas, we could have afternoon teas, lunches, we could run workshops, we could get to know each other and support each other. We then worked together to build a New South Wales network. So that's a state network, New South Wales network. And we ran network events throughout New South Wales, some online, some face-to-face. In the second year, we cascaded to another state. So once we'd worked out what to do in our own state, we cascaded to Victoria. Now, the state of Victoria Sydney to Melbourne is 1,000 kilometres. It's an hour and a half flying. It's a long way away. It's a big country. So that's another reason why we do this. But I can see the same thing would happen in England. Because the distances are small, but people's mentality about how far the distance is. I know academics who work in the south of England who would never dare go north. And Milton Keynes is a little bit too far north for some people. So I can understand that something like this might work in England as well. So we cascaded to another state. We found a university who took the lead. It was to be University of Melbourne. In the end it moved to La Trobe University as the lead, and RMIT jointly leading it. But anyway, this was the plan, who worked on their university clusters, took what they'd learnt from us, and we helped them build a Victorian network, so a state network. The aim was then to keep going and build a third cluster in a network in South Australia, again more than 1,000 kilometres away to Adelaide, and eventually move to Western Australia and build an Australian network. As it worked out, we did actually get 3 very strong states working as part of the community of practice over the less than 3 years, 2.5 years. So we developed up, in terms of helping people move from state to state, cascading to another state, the EnROLE uptake model. So I'll explain it here in depth, and then I'm going to, as an overview, and then I'm going to go into more detail. So to us, the important thing was to build an identity for the community. So part of having those badges was about building identity. It sounds very cute. It sounds as if it's flippant, but it's not. It works. It's a bit like people handing out bookmarks, but with a badge you wear it. So you become much more enrolled. I'm enrolled. They became quite sought after items. If you were at a conference and half a dozen of us had enroll badges on, they'd want to know where they could get them. Well, why aren't we in the club? What do we have to do to be in the club? It's amazing how well that technique works of badges. And I'm very sorry I haven't brought you your badges here today, because you do qualify as EnROLE members now that you've suffered through one of my presentations. So first of all, we had to define and name the area of practice. And again, online role play was a newly emerging area. Not many people knew about it. And so we had to explain it and define it. we did the clusters, and then we linked the clusters into cascading networks. Yes, we did build a repository, but it was step 2. So we collected and catalogued learning design descriptions. We didn't put the actual role plays on the repositories. This is a learning design project. It's very hard to put a role play onto a system. So it's about describing the role play and putting the learning designs there. Then we ran events and developed resources. So some of these events were face-to-face. As I said, we had workshops, we appointed guides, we appointed fellows actually to help each other in developing up new role plays and developing partnerships. We also set about to peer review, so provide reward and recognition by peer reviewing the things that were on the repository. So trying to encourage people to put learning designs on the repository. Why would you put it there? Why would you share your teaching idea? How do you get famous from putting something on a repository? So we set out to, and I'll show you more about this, to design a peer review process that would be relevant to a repository. And then partnerships. So this is the overview of it. Build a community identity, and then these are the 4 other elements that are part of the EnROLE uptake model. So to build a community of practice. Community identity. The need was for recognition, so our strategy was to build a repository with peer review. So from talking to academics about what was happening with teaching and learning in their university, they felt they weren't being recognised. So we feel that by publishing on a repository and providing peer-reviewed evidence that the contribution was useful and being taken up by other people is an important part of building a repository. They needed support. People were operating in isolation. Innovators are often in isolation. There might only be 1 or 2 in each university, and they need to be rewarded. So we help them formally evaluate their online role plays and do co-authored publications to get into top-ranked journals and so on, so that they would get reward through the traditional academic publication route. And many of them were suffering under huge workload issues and trying to sustain their role play. So this is why our strategy was to set up partnerships. Rather than operating in isolation, finding partners in their own university or in other universities helped keep the role play going. So on the repository side, we ended up with, on the repository, this is the list of all of them, Australian ones and international ones, 128 role plays on the repository. Not all of them have learning designs on the repository. Sorry, we know about 128 role plays in our catalogue, of which about 80 are written up on the learning designs repository. We feel we were responsible for, we know we were responsible for 32 new role plays. And in the main, we did that by setting up role play partnerships. Rather than exciting an individual innovator to do a role play, we said, don't try and do it by yourself. You'll get burnt out. Go into partnership with someone else. So we deliberately set up role play partnerships. And I'm reminded here of a quote from Gráinne Connolly, recently left from the Open University and called to Leicester. So one of the key challenges is getting teachers to share design. There have been countless examples of learning object, OER and good practice repositories. However, their impact on changing practice has been limited. End users rarely add resources. Such sites usually require an investment in terms of someone entering resources and maintaining the repository. Absolutely true. For Project EnROLE, I employed a full-time project manager whose job was to go around and nag and cajole and write up the learning designs from the people. So again, you can't just build a repository and people will start putting things in it. They don't. It's the face-to-face and human interaction, going around and helping them write up their contribution to the repository. It was a good 2 years' work to get 70 learning designs up there. It doesn't happen by itself. So here is the website. I know that Sandy, you've been to it. I think Chris has been to it. Anyone else been to it? It's the next thing you're going to do, isn't it?
I already sent it to a student.
Well done, here's a badge, a virtual badge. So you can search on title, keyword and so on, the normal things you can do. Here's an example of what comes up, or part of it. So here's a famous Australian online role play called Mekong eSIM. Again, a well-sustained role play, been running for more than 10 years. And one of the reasons why we've constructed our ideas about communities of practice is by looking at role plays like Mekong, ESIM. Why are they successful and why are they sustained? It's because we think it was developed as a partnership. So 3 universities were involved in this. I have to say that one of the partners was Denise Kirkpatrick, who's your PVC teaching and learning, is that what you call it here, at the OU. So she was the educational evaluator on this project and has published a lot about this project. And it was developed jointly by University of Adelaide and the University of Technology, Sydney, and continues to run at the University of Adelaide. It does not continue to run in partnership anymore for various reasons, although they're all very good friends. It's just that the curriculum changed at UTS and they've moved on to other things. But the design of it as a partnership is what's key here. That it was 2 universities helping each other to think about what needed to be in the role play. Means that it's a very rich role play. It's got a good set of roles. It's got a good scenario, a really rich scenario about the Mekong Delta. And of course it had a really good educational evaluator, Denise Kirkpatrick. We have to say that because I'm here today, right? So do look up this one because it's a really interesting role play. It's also interesting because it's been running so long, students now contribute to the role play in the sense of they're building it, not just participating in it. So there's a lot of resources on the University of Adelaide website that are student created, and that's another trend that we're also noticing. So that's the repository. Events and resources. I can't stress enough that you have to run events, not just online events but face-to-face events. You cannot just have a repository. So Project EnROLE in its 2.5 years did 43 events in 3 Australian states. Again, that's why I had a project manager who put these together. And our final event, I just want to show is a bit of fun. We ran a masked ball. We wanted to do something that was in the theme of online role plays. All will be revealed. Everybody came along with masks, all the role play designers, and during the course of the afternoon they would demonstrate about their role play by taking their mask off and talking about their role play. Because in an online repository you see the learning design being written up, but you don't really know much about the person who's the designer. The real star, if you like, is the designer, not the role play. So we wanted to reveal the people behind the masks. It was quite an interesting afternoon. Oh yeah. And finally, peer review. Now I have to say we in the end did not do very much here, and that's one of the reasons why I've come to the OU on this fellowship, is to think a bit more about how we do peer review in an online repository and a community of practice. But this is the peer review framework that we came up with. Not sure I'm going to go into a whole lot of detail here about it. Again, it's on the website if you want to look. But it does involve several stages. So there's the internal review that you go through first before you go to external review. A lot of people assume that you go straight to the external review, but what we were trying to do in building our community of practice was scaffold people, build them gradually towards this. Believe it or not, academics are quite shy about their teaching ideas, whereas they might go and publish something in their research discipline area quite readily. They will not do the same in teaching. So we were trying to scaffold people through the stages of peer review. Finally, partnerships. This is the EnROLE partnerships framework. As I've mentioned, I think this is key to building a community by putting people together. And again, you need someone like a project manager or the original project team, who are all networkers, to get out there and network with people and help put the partnerships together. Because again, academics are quite shy. They go to conferences and they will talk about their research area, but not very often sit down and talk about teaching. So it's about having people who can mediate that. In particular, I've highlighted there that there were several types of partnerships that we were aiming for in our framework, but from the OER perspective, the Open Educational Resources perspective, and why I'm here at the OU, we put a lot of energy into partnerships for reuse of role play or repurposing a learning design. Rather than people coming up with their own role play and making all the mistakes that someone else had already made, we encourage them to start by using someone else's role play. Another part of my research, which I won't go into today, had been tracking how much people are reusing. And I'm finding very little reuse. In Australia, the learning designs movement is much more popular is not the right word, what's the word, has more traction than the learning objects movement in higher education. And so what we were trying to do was say, well, how do you get people to reuse other people's material? And by learning objects, we don't just mean a digital clip. I mean a full role play can be a learning object. Why don't people just take up someone else's role play instead of inventing their own? So that's where most of our energy went into, was getting reuse of role play. So for example, getting new partners into the Mekong eSIM. So University of Wollongong became a partner in the Mekong eSIM, and rather than developing their own eSIM. And the way we did that was that the Mekong eSIM was originally designed for engineering students, but there's a large role in there for journalism, for media releases. So we put our journalism students at University of Wollongong into the Mekong eSIM with the engineering students at University of Adelaide, which is 1,500 kilometres away. And there are very interesting interactions that come out of that collaboration between students. That Mekong eSIM is now running, no, it's another one I'll show you in a minute, that we also put new universities into partnership. So encouraging reuse of the learning objects. Or if they spotted a learning design that was interesting and wanted to repurpose it for their own area, at least they had a partner who would help them. So rather than just taking the idea and working through it themselves, we actually put them in partnership with the original designer. And that was the whole idea about the mask ball, was, helping people meet the designer. So this is another very famous role play I'm just going to show you quickly. It's the oldest online role play that I'm aware of in Australia and the world. It's called Middle Eastern Politics. It's been running for 20 years and still runs, and has different partners coming into it all the time, including University of Wollongong. So it's an example of reuse. In Middle Eastern Politics, there are about 70 roles. It's quite a complex one. You'd think some people get put off running role plays when they see this one because it looks so complex. And you really have to know your Middle Eastern politics. I couldn't run this myself because I don't understand Middle Eastern politics well enough. But the people who designed this, Andrew Vincent, is a Middle East fanatic and really understands his stuff. And this role play has students coming up to him years afterwards saying that they remember doing this and what an impact it had on their lives. They take the character of a real person in the Middle East context. So it could be the President of the United States, it could be Gaddafi, it could be, and students play it generally in teams of 2 or 3 per character. They have a scenario that's written by the academic 1 month into the future. So knowing their Middle Eastern politics very well, they write a scenario that's quite current, but they're projecting out 1 month in the future. The role play runs for 1 month. So it's quite an extended role play. Most role plays, I forgot to say, run for about a month, as opposed to face-to-face role plays, which you tend to do in the classroom for just an hour as an activity. So they're a much more reflective exercise than face-to-face, which has a different purpose. Not saying replace face-to-face, it just has a different purpose. And this role play ends at the end of the 4 weeks with an international video conference, because the role play was also played between 2 universities, Georgetown University in Washington and the university that the academic is at. He was at the University of Melbourne for 10 years and then he was at Macquarie University for 10 years. A couple of times he's also used a Middle Eastern university, the American University in Cairo. And that just adds really interesting dynamics to it. I have to say that very often an Australian plays the American president, for example.
I was just wondering, because you mentioned about the face-to-face role of these, if you have this wide range of universities, are they all running at the same time and they're part of that, so that presumably can't be face-to-face?
No, but the teams playing the character are at the same university, so they're operating face-to-face while they're thinking about how they're going to play their character.
So the actual teams are just at one university?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes. But they then have to negotiate and interact with teams playing another character at another university. In fact, they don't know usually where the characters are based. That's completely virtual. At the end, they come together for an international video conference, which is a UN peace conference. And I'm going to show you a video clip. You'll see that the students take this very seriously. And I've been filming and mapping these students for over 20 years, from when they started at the University of Melbourne until more recently at, this one is at Macquarie University. So it's interinstitutional and international.
I first got the idea for this project from the United States, where I'd encountered role-playing exercises conducted in-house within specific universities, perhaps over a weekend or something like that. At the University of Melbourne, I came across a computer scientist who suggested we use email and the World Wide Web, and the whole world could participate in a simulation rather than just the students in one particular class. And my feeling was that by having this kind of a simulation, it would really bring students closer to the nitty-gritty of politics, of decision-making, of making decisions on the run. It would give them a bit of an insight into what motivates world leaders and politicians of different sorts, rather than just the rather passive description of what they do. By acting out what they're doing, my feeling was that the students would get a much greater understanding of the way Middle East politics operates, and by extension of the way politics and perhaps even life operates.
We were given a character. We chose President Rafsanjani of Iran. Then we wrote a role profile so that everybody else in the simulation generally knew just information about us, quick information, so they could look us up, find out who we were aligned with and who we weren't aligned with. And then we began the simulation. We wrote letters to everybody. Basically in the beginning it was just outlining our aims and what we were trying to achieve in the simulation. The US fears our independence, the US fears our persistence to unify the Middle East and bring strength, and it fears the sounds of our protests.
And then for a week or two, the students have to basically research their role and write a role profile. Then we release a scenario of various events which are supposed to have occurred in the Middle East, to which the different players have to respond. And for about 3 weeks they use electronic mail and various other forms of contact to respond to these events and to try and advance their own interests and thwart the interests of their opponents. The simulation then finishes with a teleconference where we link all of the different characters around the world for a 3-hour international conference.
Okay, so you can see that they do take it seriously. They're not being flippant when they dress up like that. They really, really feel as if they're doing... I've got some more recent video where we can see students who are dressed as the FBI and CIA, and, you know, they're amazing. They really get into it. When they first started running this at the University of Melbourne, video conference was not the norm. You didn't have them in universities. The only video conference suite that we knew of in Melbourne was actually at the American Embassy, and we had to go to the American Embassy to do the video conference with America. But they came with the dish dashers on their head, and the security guards wouldn't let them in, and there was, you know, a lot of... And this was pre-9/11, so this was 20 years ago. But yes, it's a very powerful role play, and it's not surprising that it's had quite an impact on us and the community. So we tried to map the impact of the Middle Eastern politics simulation, and showing all the other universities that have either taken up the role play itself or taken up the design. And you can see that actually Mekong eSIM there is derived from Middle Eastern politics. So the two academics did meet at a conference. No, sorry, Mekong eSIM, they had seen the paper by Andrew Vincent's, oh, here's another connection, that was published in JIME, right, your Journal of Interactive Multimedia Education, that started here at the OU, or still here at the OU. They had read his article, his paper about Middle Eastern politics, which was the only paper he ever wrote about it, and decided they would do something similar here. And then it just kept going. So what we did as part of Project EnROLE was try to map generations of use. I called it generations of use. So we end up having kind of, let's go to this one, family trees. And so Mekong, once it started, actually spawned some other things. So Mekong eSIM became Halong Bay eSIM, and also Disaster Down Under, and Global eSIM, and Big Paper BSIM. So there's a whole spawning that you can see of people taking up teaching ideas. So it does happen, but only because I think we fostered the family. And the fact that I've used the word family tree is significant, you know, that we wanted to build a community. It's personal, it's face-to-face, as well as online, as well as international, but you've got to be a family. So that's the Mekong family tree, and here's the Round Table family tree. And so we built family trees around all the key role plays, and these were displayed at the Mask Ball. But this happened, if I go back, because we ran role play partnership workshops. So again, a key part of building the community is face-to-face events where you look at what does it take to build a partnership? How can we put you together to design the role play or use each other's role plays? How do you peer review it? How do you then write publications as a result of it? And we've got some rich publications having come out of Project EnROLE now where people are co-authoring. So in conclusion, there was a report at the end which you can get off the website. We call it the Blue Report for building, linking, understanding and extending, which were the key phases of the project. These were the project outcomes. 17 EnROLE family trees. There we go. Not sure why I can't get that to go on here. Okay. Also, one of the things that came out of it, and I'm going to stop now, but we'll come back to this if we want to have questions, is trying to actually better position online role play in the world as an unheard of type of e-learning design. We found it difficult to position it, and we were constantly coming up with people who are saying, oh, well, that's a simulation and I do simulations, and we were trying to say, no, it's different from simulations. So we had long debates throughout the whole project about whether role play was a simulation or not. In the end, we've decided it is a simulation. It's a type of simulation that belongs in this role-based corner over to the left here. So you can see 7.1 is highlighted because I've moved the sliders into a position that says, well, it's got a fair number of roles in it, it doesn't have much data management, and it doesn't have many rules. So Scarlet Letter is the example that comes up here if you think of trying to navigate your way around this simulation triad. What we're saying is that role plays are generally on the left-hand greyed out side of this simulation triad. That is, they're computer mediated, whereas simulations, as people generally understood them, are computer based, so they're on the right hand side. So what we were dealing with was the left hand side of the triad versus simulations, which are the right hand side of the triad. So we're trying to explain the difference between the online role plays that we were running, which involve students interacting with each other, versus simulations which generally have students interacting with a computer one-on-one. So that's another interesting contribution we can have more discussion about. There's also a book that came out of it, and the series editor, gosh, surprise, is Chris Pegler and Alison Littlejohn, and Chris Pegler sitting here. And there's a number of books in this series now, aren't there, Chris?
Yeah.
About 12 now, 10?
No, I think we're up to 5, but we've got about 11 overall in the pipeline.
Yeah, so it's been interesting. So thank you to Chris and Alison Littlejohn for allowing us to publish in this series, because it's been an interesting exercise. Notice that we're into marketing here. We call it the power of role-based e-learning. I hope you've all got the power this morning. I should be handing out your electric sockets. And there's another book about to come out later in the year, which is an edited collection of works, rather than an authored book. So the project is continuing, and now I'm here at the OU as part of the OLnet Fellowship to do some more thinking about continuing the community of practice through CloudWorks, because one of the things we weren't able to achieve very well in the project in Australia was the online community, because the vehicle that we were going to use was the national ALTC exchange got canned. Is that the equivalent of Jorum here, or?
No, I think it's broader than that.
Yeah. So we were supposed to be using that, and we were trialling that, and then the government decided to can the ALTC and the Australian Learning and Teaching Council in order to pay for all the floods in Queensland, the flood damage in Queensland, and also canned the ALTC exchange. So the vehicle we wanted to use to continue the community online doesn't exist, so I'm looking at using CloudWorks for that, thanks to Grania and the OU, and also looking more at the peer review side of it, because again, the online vehicle we were going to use in Australia was going to have peer review facilities in it, not to the extent that we wanted, but we were going to push that whole side of it, and we haven't been able to follow through with that. So I'm hoping that this collaboration with the OU will help me to continue on with what we were trying to do in Project EnROLE, and it doesn't have to just be about online role play. If you don't want to do role play, I won't force you. But there are people at the University of Wollongong who think they can't get promoted unless they've done a role play, because Sandra said so. So that's what I'm doing here as part of my fellowship. I'll finish now and just see if people want to ask questions